have here the toxicology report, which shows there are a staggering 9 different prescription drugs in Elvis's body at the time of his death.
Elvis Presley was larger than life, but his death remained shrouded in mystery. On August 16, 1977, the king of rock and roll was found unresponsive in the bathroom of his Graceland mansion. The official cause? Heart failure. But decades later, shocking details emerged. His colon was nearly twice the size of a normal one, the result of chronic constipation from years of prescription drug abuse. Could Elvis have literally been killed by his own body shutting down? Elvis's life was filled with spectacle, from the scandalous hip-shaking that sent conservative America into a frenzy to the meteoric rise that made him the most famous musician on earth. But behind the fame was a man constantly reinventing himself, pushing boundaries, breaking rules, and ultimately paying the price. He was a truck driver before he was a rock star, a rebel before he was a legend, a king before he knew how to rule. This is the untold story of Elvis Presley. The rise, the excess, the struggles, and the shocking truths behind the man who changed music forever. Elvis Aaron Presley entered the world on January 8, 1935, but he wasn't alone. He had a twin, Jesse Garon Presley, except Jesse never took a breath. Stillborn, he was buried the next day in an unmarked grave, and from that moment on, Elvis carried the weight of being the chosen one. His mother, Gladys, was fiercely protective, convinced her surviving son had been spared for something great. But the Presley family wasn't blessed with an easy life. They were dirt poor, scraping by in Tupelo, Mississippi during the Great Depression. Their home? A tiny 2-room shotgun shack. His father, Vernon, was a dreamer who made bad decisions. One of them landed him in prison for forging a check, leaving Gladys and young Elvis struggling to survive. Through it all, music was Elvis's escape. Church was his first concert hall, the fiery gospel choirs filling his ears with soaring harmonies. But outside the church doors, he was absorbing something else. The sound of the blues pouring out of juke joints and street corners where black musicians played raw, heart-wrenching songs that told stories of pain, love, and survival. Elvis didn't just listen, he soaked it in. He watched how these performers moved, how they let the music take control of their bodies. It was dangerous, it was thrilling, and it would become part of him. Country music was the other ingredient in his musical DNA. The South was alive with the sounds of Hank Williams, Jimmie Rodgers, and Bill Monroe. Their twang, their storytelling, their longing, it all found a home inside the young boy from Tupelo. In 1946, Elvis asked his mother for a bicycle. Instead, she handed him a guitar. It was a cheap, simple instrument, but it was destiny. He didn't just strum it, he felt it. The vibrations, the rhythm, the power of making sound. This wasn't just a toy, it was a weapon. A ticket out of poverty, a key to something bigger. By the time Elvis turned 18, he was just another kid in Memphis trying to find his way. He took a job as a truck driver, but his mind was elsewhere. On music, on rhythm, on the sound that was forming inside him. He didn't look like a country singer, and he didn't fit in with the polished pop stars of the day. He was something new, something raw. In 1953, Elvis walked into Sun Studio, a tiny recording studio run by Sam Phillips. He paid $3.98 to record 2 songs, just a simple gift for his mother. But fate had other plans. Phillips, always on the hunt for a white singer who could capture the feeling of black music, heard something in Elvis. He wasn't just another kid with a guitar. He had it, that electrifying, unpredictable, rule-breaking it that couldn't be taught. The moment came in July 1954. During a late-night jam session with guitarist Scotty Moore and bassist Bill Black, Elvis picked up his guitar and tore into That's All Right, a blues song by Arthur Crudup. But this wasn't just a cover, it was different. It was fast, wild, untamed. When Memphis DJ Dewey Phillips played the song on the radio, the response was immediate. The phone lines exploded. People wanted to know who this was. More importantly, they wanted to know what he was. Was he black? Was he white? He was something in between, a force that blurred the lines in a deeply segregated America. From that moment, Elvis was on fire. He started performing across the South, and his stage presence was something the world had never seen before. The way he moved, hips swinging, legs shaking, eyes locked onto the crowd, it was animalistic, hypnotic, and to some, completely scandalous. Parents were horrified. Preachers called him the devil's messenger. But teenagers? They worshipped him. By 1955, Elvis had caught the attention of Colonel Tom Parker, a shrewd, cunning manager who saw dollar signs in Presley's future. Under Parker's guidance, Elvis signed with RCA Victor, and in 1956, his first RCA single, Heartbreak Hotel, exploded across the country. It wasn't just a hit, it was a revolution. His self-titled debut album followed, featuring tracks like Blue Suede Shoes and Hound Dog. He was no longer just a regional phenomenon. He was national, then global. The world had found its new king. But with fame came controversy. Religious leaders condemned him. TV stations debated banning him. And when he performed on The Ed Sullivan Show, the camera famously filmed him from the waist up because his movements were deemed too sexual for American audiences. Elvis didn't care. He knew exactly what he was doing. He wasn't just selling music. He was selling rebellion, and the world was buying. At school, he was quiet, a misfit, an outsider with greasy hair and thrift store clothes. But when he played music, everything changed. He had something no one else did, something dangerous, something different, and soon the world would hear it. By 1957, Elvis Presley wasn't just a musician, he was a phenomenon. His concerts were riots, his records sold in the millions. His name alone could make teenagers scream, faint, and fight their way to the front row just to catch a glimpse of him. But with great fame comes great scrutiny. As his popularity grew, so did the backlash. Critics slammed him as a dangerous influence on America's youth. Conservative groups labeled him vulgar. One Florida judge even warned him that if he continued his obscene performances, he'd be arrested for indecency. Elvis laughed it off, but the pressure was real. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Colonel Tom Parker was turning his star into something even bigger. Music wasn't enough. Elvis had to be a movie star. Parker secured him a deal with Paramount Pictures, and in 1956 he made his big screen debut in Love Me Tender. The film was a smash hit, and suddenly Elvis wasn't just an artist, he was a Hollywood leading man. Over the next few years, he released a string of hit singles: Don't Be Cruel, Jailhouse Rock, All Shook Up, while also starring in a series of films that cemented his heartthrob status. But just as he was reaching his peak, everything changed. In 1958, Elvis received a letter that no celebrity wanted to get. The U.S. Army was drafting him. He could have fought it. He could have used his fame to dodge service. Instead, he embraced it. In March 1958, the world watched as Elvis Presley, global superstar rock and roll icon, stood in line like every other young man, dressed in military fatigues, ready to serve his country. It was a strategic move. By going into the Army, Elvis wasn't just proving himself to America, he was silencing his critics, the ones who said he was just a reckless punk, the ones who said he was a bad influence, the ones who said he wasn't a real man. For 2 years, Elvis lived the life of a soldier in West Germany. No concerts, no screaming fans, just duty, discipline, and structure. But his time in the Army wasn't just about service. It was in Germany that Elvis met 14-year-old Priscilla Beaulieu, the daughter of an Air Force officer. She would later become his wife, but their love story would be anything but traditional. While Elvis was away, tragedy struck. In August 1958, his mother Gladys, the woman who had been his rock, his protector, his best friend, died of hepatitis at just 46 years old. Elvis was shattered. He sobbed uncontrollably at her funeral, clutching her casket, refusing to let go. Something inside him broke that day. The boy who had been so closely tied to his mother was gone, and in his place, a new Elvis Presley was emerging. By the time he was discharged in 1960, the world had changed. Rock and roll had evolved. New artists were taking over, and Elvis the King was about to find out that holding on to his crown would be harder than he ever imagined. When Elvis returned from the Army in 1960, he was still the king, but the world of music had started to shift. Rock and roll was evolving and new stars were rising. But under the guidance of Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis wasn't sent back into the recording studio to reclaim his throne. Instead, he was sent to Hollywood. Colonel Parker had one goal: turn Elvis Presley into the biggest movie star in America. At first, it seemed like a winning strategy. His early films, G.I. Blues, Blue Hawaii, and Viva Las Vegas, were smash hits. The movies were lighthearted, colorful, and packed with catchy songs that sold millions of records. But as the years went on, the formula became painfully predictable. Every Elvis movie started to look the same. He played a charming, rebellious young man who always got the girl, and the plot was little more than an excuse to string together a dozen feel-good songs. The critics tore them apart. They called them mindless, repetitive, and a waste of Elvis's talent. Elvis knew it. He wanted to make serious films, to challenge himself as an actor, but Parker refused to let him take risks. The manager controlled everything, choosing the scripts, the directors, and even the music. By the mid-60s, Elvis's frustration was growing. His albums were no longer selling like they once had. Worse, the British invasion had begun. Bands like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and The Who were taking over the charts, redefining rock music in a way that made Elvis look outdated. For the first time in his career, the King was fading into irrelevance. His Hollywood dream had turned into a prison, a golden cage filled with money but no artistic fulfillment. And deep down, Elvis knew if he didn't do something to reinvent himself, his reign would be over. By 1968, Elvis Presley was a has-been. He hadn't performed live in 7 years. His career was drowning in forgettable movies, and a new generation of artists had stolen the spotlight. Then NBC offered him a one-time television special. This was his chance, maybe his last, to prove to the world that he was still the king, and he didn't waste it. On December 3, 1968, the world watched as Elvis walked onto a small stage in a tight black leather suit. Gone were the movie sets, the cheesy love songs, and the predictable Hollywood gimmicks. This was Elvis, raw and real. He grabbed a guitar, sat down with his old bandmates, and let loose. The audience watched in shock. This wasn't an actor playing a musician. This was a legend reborn. He sang Hound Dog, Heartbreak Hotel, Love Me Tender, and Jailhouse Rock like he was fighting for his throne, and he won. The '68 comeback special was a cultural moment, a career resurrection that reminded the world why Elvis Presley was the king. With his confidence restored, Elvis returned to the stage for real. But instead of touring the world, Colonel Parker had a different plan: Las Vegas. In 1969, Elvis signed a massive residency deal with the International Hotel, performing in front of packed crowds night after night. His performances were larger than life. Flashy jumpsuits, a full orchestra, dramatic lighting, and that unmistakable voice. Audiences went wild. Sin City belonged to the king. For a while, everything seemed perfect. Elvis was performing again, the money was flowing, and he was back on top. But behind the dazzling lights of Vegas, something was wrong. The schedule was brutal. 2 shows a night, 7 days a week, and Elvis, always the perfectionist, pushed himself to the limit. To keep up, he started relying on prescription drugs, uppers to stay awake, downers to sleep. The same energy that had fueled his comeback was slowly destroying him. By the early 1970s, Elvis Presley was living 2 lives. On stage, he was still the king, a larger-than-life superstar, performing to sold-out crowds in Las Vegas. But behind closed doors, he was falling apart. His marriage to Priscilla was crumbling. Years of touring, his increasing dependence on drugs, and his growing paranoia had driven a wedge between them. Priscilla, feeling neglected and trapped in the shadow of his fame, left him in 1972. It shattered him. He had always been possessive over her, and losing her sent him into a downward spiral. His health began to deteriorate rapidly. The once lean, electrifying Elvis was replaced by a bloated, sluggish version of himself. He suffered from insomnia, high blood pressure, liver damage, and an enlarged colon, all made worse by the pills he was popping like candy. His weight fluctuated wildly. Some nights he could barely move on stage. Other nights, he was so medicated that he slurred his words and forgot lyrics. His friends and bandmates begged him to slow down, but Colonel Parker kept pushing him. More shows, more money, more pressure. Elvis's inner circle, the Memphis Mafia, enabled his addictions. They weren't just his friends, they were his protectors, his enablers, and, in many ways, his jailers. They made sure he had whatever he wanted: pills, food, women, anything to numb the pain. Despite his failing health, Elvis kept performing. In 1973, he made history with Aloha from Hawaii, the first concert broadcast live via satellite. It was watched by over 1.5 billion people worldwide. But even that success couldn't save him. His body was giving out. By 1976, Elvis had become a ghost of his former self. His speech was slurred. His once famous movements were sluggish. His face, bloated and tired, no longer belonged to the rebellious young man who had once shocked the world. Yet, despite everything, he refused to stop. On June 26, 1977, he performed his last concert in Indianapolis. He could barely get through the songs. He looked exhausted, lost. It was clear Elvis Presley was running on borrowed time, and just weeks later, his body finally gave up. Elvis Presley's final months were a slow-motion train wreck that no one around him dared to stop. He was only 42 years old, but he looked twice his age, bloated, pale, his once dazzling blue eyes now dull and lifeless. His body was failing, but his will to perform refused to die. Even when he could barely stand, he would stumble onto stage in his rhinestone jumpsuits, his gut pressing against the fabric, sweat pouring down his face, struggling to breathe. His speech was slurred, his movements sluggish. Some nights, he forgot his own lyrics. His addiction to prescription drugs had spiraled completely out of control. In 1977 alone, his personal doctor, George Nicopolis, Dr. Nick, prescribed him over 10,000 pills, a cocktail of painkillers, sedatives, and amphetamines. Elvis didn't just take them, he devoured them by the handful. His eating habits had become legendary. He would binge on insane amounts of food. A single meal could include 6 cheeseburgers, a pound of bacon, deep-fried peanut butter and banana sandwiches, and gallons of soda. His weight ballooned past 350 pounds. Yet through all of this, Colonel Tom Parker refused to let him rest. Elvis had debts to pay, and Parker, who was later revealed to be an illegal immigrant with ties to gambling debts, needed his cash cow to keep performing. Then came August 16, 1977. It was supposed to be a normal day. That night, Elvis was scheduled to fly to Portland, Maine for another concert. Instead, he never left Graceland alive. At around 2 p.m., Elvis's fiancée, Ginger Alden, found him collapsed on the floor of his bathroom. He wasn't breathing. His skin was a horrifying shade of blue. His body was stiff. The king of rock and roll was dead. The scene was gruesome. Elvis had died on the toilet. He was face down, pants around his ankles, in what can only be described as a humiliating and undignified end. The initial report claimed that he had suffered a heart attack, but behind closed doors, something far more disturbing was unfolding. The autopsy, what they didn't want you to know. An autopsy was rushed, performed within hours of his death. The official cause, cardiac arrhythmia. But that was a lie. For decades, the full details of Elvis's autopsy report were sealed, hidden away by his family and authorities. Why? Because the truth was even darker than the world imagined. Then in 2013, shocking new information surfaced. Elvis had been dying for years. His body was so riddled with disease and dysfunction that it was a miracle he had lived as long as he did. One of the most shocking discoveries was his colon. A normal human colon is about 5 feet long and around 2 inches wide. Elvis's colon was twice that size, 9 feet long and 5 inches wide. He had severe chronic constipation. His intestines were so impacted with fecal matter that his body had stopped absorbing nutrients properly. His stomach was filled with months-old waste. Some experts believe that he didn't die from a heart attack at all. Instead, his body may have literally shut down due to a toxic buildup of waste. He might have been suffering from megacolon, a deadly condition where the intestines expand to the point of rupture. But that wasn't all. Elvis's prescription drug use had completely wrecked his internal organs. His liver was damaged, his heart was enlarged, his arteries were clogged. He had advanced diabetes. His body was in a state of total collapse. According to coroner Joseph Davis, who re-examined Elvis's autopsy in the 90s, there was no evidence of a drug overdose. Instead, he suggested that Elvis likely suffered a violent sudden heart attack while straining on the toilet. But what about the drugs? In 1977, Dr. Nick was investigated for recklessly prescribing thousands of pills to Elvis. Some claimed he had turned the king into a walking pharmacy. Yet, the most disturbing theory came from Dr. Forrest Tennant, a specialist who reviewed Elvis's medical history. He believed that Elvis suffered from an undiagnosed autoimmune disorder, possibly Shy-Drager syndrome, a rare disease that causes nerve damage, chronic pain, and digestive failure. Did Elvis know he was dying? Some believe he did. In the months before his death, Elvis spoke about death constantly. He told friends that he felt like he didn't have much time left. He started giving away jewelry, cars, and personal items as if he was preparing for the end. In his final days, he was paranoid, delusional, and deeply depressed. One of the last things he ever said was to his cousin Billy Smith just hours before he died. "Billy, I'm going to the bathroom to read." He never came back. Elvis Presley's death was ugly, shocking, and deeply tragic. He was a prisoner in his own body, weighed down by fame, addiction, and the pressure to be the king even when he was falling apart. The official autopsy remains sealed until 2027. What else is being hidden? Will the world finally know the full truth? One thing is certain: Elvis didn't just die. He was slowly destroyed. By the industry, by those around him, and by his own demons. But while his death was tragic, his legacy remains untouchable. He was more than just a rock star. He was a revolution, a cultural earthquake. And no matter how shocking his final days were, Elvis Presley will never truly die. Elvis Presley's life was a roller coaster of triumph and tragedy, a story of greatness, excess, and an ending that still shocks the world to this day. But despite everything, the controversies, the struggles, and the heartbreaking downfall, his music, his impact, and his legend will never fade. From the moment he stepped into Sun's studio to the final days at Graceland, Elvis changed music forever. His influence lives on in every rock star who dares to break the rules, every performer who electrifies a stage, and every fan who still plays his records today. But now, we want to hear from you. What's your favorite Elvis song? Do you believe there's more to the mystery of his death? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the life and legend of Elvis Presley, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a video. More shocking stories, hidden truths, and music history legends are coming your way. So stay tuned. Elvis may have left the building, but his story will never end.